With half a year into Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, there's one thing that is crystal clear. Russia completely disregards, neglects, or twists international law and is doing it consciously. Basically, they do whatever they want because they believe that they have the right to do so, because they can, and because they are not afraid of any serious consequences. Russia just doesn't give a damn about international law unless it serves its own goals in doing whatever they want. Treatment of Ukrainian prisoners of war is a very bright example of that. Prisoners of war, or POWs, are generally understood as combatants that have fallen into the hands of the enemy during the armed conflict. The treatment of POWs is regulated by the Third Geneva Convention, which Russia has been constantly violating. Literally, if you open the document and read it article by article, you will hardly find one that has not been violated. Almost as if Russia has been using this convention as an instruction on how to harm Ukrainian POWs as much as possible. The POWs are often kept in premises that are not intended for that. They are kept in inhumane conditions. In some cases, the basic sanitary conditions are not met, like in Olenivka, where there is no operating water supply system. The POWs are not allowed to get in contact with their relatives or close ones. They are not allowed to receive any parcels, including with the humanitarian assistance. The POWs don't have access to medical care. They are subjected to psychological and physical violence constantly, including, for instance, the monstrous cutting off the genitals with a paper knife. The recent violent explosion in Olenivka itself looks very much like Russia's direct attack to cover tortures of Ukrainian POWs, some of whom may have been already tortured to death by the time of explosion. Russia does not provide an exact number or location or access to these places of detention of Ukrainian POWs, again, which is an obligation under the Geneva Convention. And what is even more outrageous, Russia has been using these occupied territories, especially Luhansk and Donetsk regions, as a zone of complete lawlessness by running fake referendums and calling these establishments independent. Russia attempts to lift all responsibility from itself for these monstrous atrocities that have been taking place there. For weeks now, pictures of cages being put up for the possible execution of Ukrainian POWs in occupied Mariupol have been circulating, and everybody, including the United Nations, have been expressing its concerns. While trying POWs for participating in the conflict is forbidden, either on territories occupied by Russia or on the territory of Russia itself. And yet again, while the cages are being put up for the possible executions in Mariupol, Russia itself declares the defenders of Mariupol, Azov Battalion, a terrorist organization to justify the illegal trial. However, instead of increasing pressure on Russia, that is an aggressor and occupying power that is responsible for everything that is happening on those occupied territories and to Ukrainian POWs, we notice the tendency for quite the opposite. The gradual cooling off with sanctions and increasing reluctance to provide weapons to Ukraine to fight Russia. Does it mean that economic interests seem more important than the security of the continent, international law, and all human values? Or is it because there are still illusions that Russia will stop in Ukraine and its aggression will not affect other European countries? Ukraine was not the first. Russia did invade Georgia, Moldova, Chechnya, Syria before, because that is what imperialistic states do. They invade other countries until they are forced to stop. And Russia always got away with it. And if the force of law is no longer working, that means that we're going back to the law of force. And Russia will continue to do whatever it wants and invade countries whenever it wants. Is that the future the West sees possible? And if this mass killings, destructions, rapes, genocide that Russia is committing in Ukraine, if this terrorism and blackmailing that Russia is committing on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is not a red line, then what is?